The Zero and Prime Military Academy possessed a reputation that could make seasoned warriors reconsider their career choices. Perched on the edge of a binary star system where the suns never quite agreed on a schedule, the Academy had been churning out the galaxy's finest military minds for over 3 millennia. Its success rate was legendarily brutal. Roughly 40% of cadets actually graduated, while the remainder either washed out spectacularly or required extensive psychological rehabilitation, which made the current situation particularly amusing to anyone with a taste for cosmic irony. Celeste Nightingale stood in the orientation hall, her regulation-issue uniform somehow managing to look rumpled despite being freshly pressed. She possessed that peculiar human quality of appearing simultaneously alert and completely unbothered, like someone who had just woken from a nap but was ready to tackle whatever the universe decided to throw at her. Around her, representatives from 47 different species fidgeted with varying degrees of nervous energy. Commander Haxthul clicked his mandibles in what passed for contemplation among his insectoid species. The chitinous had evolved from apex predators on a world where everything wanted to eat everything else, yet even he felt a flutter of unease when discussing the Academy's most notorious trial. His compound eyes fixed on the human with something approaching fascination. "The Crucible Protocol," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of inevitable doom, "has been the final test for advanced cadets for 200 years. 72 hours. Nexus 7. Minimum supplies. Survival." The assembled cadets responded with the appropriate level of existential dread. Bryn, whose crystalline structure literally dimmed when stressed, began making soft chiming sounds that indicated deep anxiety. Mox, being gaseous by nature, started to lose cohesion around the edges, never a good sign for his species. Eos, despite belonging to a warrior culture that considered casual violence a form of small talk, began unconsciously checking her emergency beacon. Celeste raised her hand with the enthusiasm of someone asking about lunch plans. "Is there a weight limit on personal items?" she inquired cheerfully. "And are we talking actual minimal supplies or like camping minimal? Because those are totally different things." The silence that followed possessed the quality of a vacuum, complete, profound, and slightly suffocating. Axtool's antennae twitched, a gesture that among his people indicated either confusion or the onset of a migraine. "Cadet Nightingale," he said slowly, "perhaps you misunderstand the nature of this exercise. Nexus 7 is classified as a Class XII Deathworld. The atmosphere is barely breathable. The native fauna considers everything else a snack. The weather patterns include acid rain, volcanic activity, and temperature swings that can flash freeze water or turn it to steam within minutes. So, basically Tuesday in Wyoming during storm season?" Celeste nodded sagely. "Got it." Bryn's crystalline form pulsed with confused harmonics. "Wyoming?" she chimed uncertainly. "Oh, it's this place on Earth where my family has a cabin. We go there every summer for what my dad calls character building and my mum calls voluntary suffering. Last year we had to dig our own latrine because a bear destroyed the outhouse, and then we spent 3 days eating nothing but trail mix and rainwater because the supply drop got delayed by a blizzard. In July..." Celeste's expression suggested these were fond memories rather than traumatic experiences. The commander's mandibles clicked in rapid succession, a sound that typically preceded either profound wisdom or complete mental breakdown. "Cadet Nightingale, you do realize that approximately 60% of cadets activate their emergency extraction beacons within the first day." "Really?" Celeste looked genuinely surprised. "That seems like a lot. Are we talking about the same test? 72 hours, basic survival, right? Not like gladiatorial combat or anything." Mox's gaseous form contracted into a tight, worried ball. "The mortality rate," he whispered through his atmospheric manipulation, "is none." "Well, yeah," Celeste agreed reasonably. "I mean, if it was completely safe, it wouldn't really be a test, would it? Though I guess if you're smart about it, stick to basic principles, and don't do anything obviously stupid, you should be fine. It's only 3 days." The phrase, "only 3 days," hung in the air like a challenge to the universe's sense of humor. Eos, whose species had literally evolved from predators that hunted in volcanic trenches, stared at the human with something approaching awe. "You speak of survival on a death world as if it were a recreational activity." Isn't it?" Celeste shrugged. "My family does survival weekends all the time. Mum always says the best way to appreciate modern conveniences is to spend a few days without them. Plus, it's kind of fun once you get the hang of it. There's something really satisfying about building a shelter that actually works, or finding food that doesn't come in a package. Commander Hackstall made a note in his datapad with more force than strictly necessary. The stylus, designed to withstand the grip strength of a chitinous warrior, began to show stress fractures. "The test begins at dawn," he announced. "You have 6 hours to prepare. I suggest you spend them wisely." As the cadets dispersed to their various states of panic and preparation, Celeste wandered toward the equipment locker with the relaxed gait of someone heading to a picnic. Behind her, she left a wake of confused aliens, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Bryn approached Mox, her crystalline structure flickering with bewilderment. Did she just compare a Class XII Deathworld to a recreational facility? "I believe," Mox replied in his whispery, atmospheric voice, "she may have also implied that her family voluntarily subject themselves to similar conditions for enjoyment." They both turned to watch Celeste examine the standard survival kit, with the same expression most people reserved for choosing between breakfast cereals. "Either," Eos observed, joining their impromptu therapy session, "humans are the most fearlessly insane species in the galaxy, or we've been dramatically overestimating the difficulty of this test." The three of them considered this possibility in silence, each mentally reviewing everything they knew about Deathworld's survival protocols. Both options, Mox concluded, are equally terrifying. In the equipment locker, Celeste held up her emergency beacon and examined it with mild interest. "Ha," she murmured to herself, "this is way fancier than the ones we use for backcountry hiking. I wonder if it has GPS." Tomorrow, she would discover exactly how much the galaxy had underestimated the casual competence of a species that had spent millennia treating survival as a weekend hobby. Dawn on Nexus 7 arrived with all the subtlety of a cosmic tantrum. The binary suns rose in sequence, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet that would have been breathtaking if they weren't accompanied by the gentle patter of mildly corrosive precipitation. The dropship's engines whined in protest as it descended through atmosphere thick enough to chew, while inside 12 cadets contemplated their life choices with varying degrees of regret. Outside, Nicastrian proctored empties of their Dean affiliations before leaving, while the clones of the Ingress duties were put through combat screens with over 99% precipitation. The dropships whined in protest as it descended through atmospheric. The Academy's wisdom dictated that cadets be scattered across a 50-kilometer radius to prevent collaborative cheating, because apparently the difference between building character and building corpses was measured in kilometers of sulphurous wasteland. The last stepped off the transport platform with the casual grace of someone disembarking from a city bus. She took a deep breath of the acrid air, wrinkled her nose slightly, and announced, to no one in particular, "Well, it's not Colorado, but it'll do." The dropship departed with unseemly haste, leaving behind 12 emergency beacons, 12 survival kits, and one human who was already examining the local geology with the enthusiasm of a tourist at a national park. 3 kilometers away, Nex materialized from the shadows of a lava tube, his obsidian black form rippling with predatory grace. His species had evolved in the perpetual twilight of tidally locked worlds, making them natural hunters in low-light conditions. He had spent the past hour cataloging potential threats, escape routes, and defensible positions. The methodical approach had kept his people alive for millennia, which made his current situation particularly frustrating. "The human," he whispered to himself, "is building something." Through his enhanced vision, he could observe Celeste approximately 2 kilometers distant, moving with purposeful efficiency between a cluster of volcanic rocks. She appeared to be constructing, not hiding, not cowering, not even properly surveying for threats, just building, with a focused concentration of someone assembling furniture from a manual. 5 kilometers in another direction, Coral struggled with the fundamental problem of being an aquatic species on a predominantly terrestrial world. Her gill slits fluttered with distress as she attempted to locate sufficient moisture for basic survival. The emergency kit contained water purification tablets, but finding water to purify was proving challenging.
Why?
As well as jet lag, the emergency kit contained retransmitting powers, which was proving to be more than a weather booster. She had managed to locate a small thermal pool that didn't appear immediately lethal, when movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. A biped figure was walking along the ridge above her position, moving with the relaxed stride of someone on a nature walk. "Impossible," Coral burbled in her liquid voice. No one moves that casually on a Deathworld. The figure paused, seemed to consider the landscape, then began descending toward her position. As it drew closer, Coral's chromatophores shifted to alarmed patterns. As she recognized the human from orientation, "Oh, hey there," Celeste called out cheerfully, picking her way down the rocky slope with practiced ease. "I saw you from up there and thought I'd check if you were okay. You look a bit stressed." Coral's swim bladder contracted with surprise. "Stressed? We are on a Class XI death world with minimal supplies and hostile fauna. Of course I am stressed." "Fair point," Celeste acknowledged, settling onto a convenient boulder. "Though honestly, this isn't too bad. The air's a bit thin and the rain's kind of burny, but I've been in worse places. My uncle's hunting cabin in Alaska doesn't have running water or electricity, and the mosquitoes there are basically tiny vampires with wings." "You speak of survival as if it were recreational," Coral observed, her translator struggling with the concept. "Well, sort of. I mean, it's not like I'd choose to vacation here, but it's not that different from backcountry camping. You find water, build shelter, stay dry, don't eat anything that looks suspicious. Basic stuff, really." Celeste gestured toward the thermal pool. "Speaking of which, you probably don't want to drink that. It's got a lot of mineral content that might not agree with your system. There's a clean spring about a half a kilometer that way, just past those red rocks." Coral's chromatophores flickered with confusion. "How do you know this?" "Oh, I spent the morning doing a basic survey. Water sources, wind patterns, potential shelter sites, that sort of thing. Standard procedure, really. My dad always says, the first thing you do in unfamiliar territory is get the lay of the land." "The first thing I did," Coral admitted, "was panic." "Yes, totally normal too. First time in a new environment is always a bit overwhelming. But you're doing fine. You found water, you're staying put instead of wandering around randomly, and you haven't done anything obviously dangerous. That's better than a lot of people manage." Somewhere in the distance, a low howl echoed across the landscape, followed by the distinctive sound of an emergency beacon activating. "And there goes another one," Celeste observed mildly. "That's what, the fourth one since this morning? You have been counting the extractions." "Hard not to, really. The beacons are pretty loud, and the pickup ships aren't exactly stealthy." Celeste stood and brushed dust from her uniform. "Anyway, I should get back to my camp. I've got a fire going and some local tubers roasting that should be ready soon. You're welcome to stop by if you want. I'm set up about 2 clicks north of here, just follow the smoke." Coral watched in bewilderment as the human walked away, still moving with that same relaxed stride. As an afterthought, Celeste called back, "Oh, and if you hear something that sounds like a cross between a foghorn and a chainsaw, that's probably a granite stalker. They're mostly nocturnal, but they don't see very well, so just stay still and they'll move on." "How do you know about granite stalkers?" Coral called after her. "Read the briefing materials," Celeste replied, already disappearing over the ridge. They mentioned the local fauna, seemed like useful information. As evening approached, the remaining cadets began to grasp the fundamental difference between their approach and Celeste's. While they huddled in caves and rock crevices, rationing their emergency supplies and jumping at every sound, smoke rose steadily from the humans' camp like a beacon of impossible competence. Mox, who had found refuge in a relatively stable gas pocket within a lava tube, extended his consciousness toward the smoke signal. Through atmospheric manipulation, he could taste the air around the human's position. Wood smoke, yes, but also something else. Something that smelled suspiciously like cooking food. "She is roasting local flora," he whispered to himself in amazement. "She is treating this as a culinary adventure." Bryn, whose crystalline structure made her particularly sensitive to electromagnetic fluctuations, could detect the steady heat signature of Celeste's fire from her position 3 kilometers away. While she shivered in the cooling air, the human was apparently maintaining a comfortable temperature through the simple expedient of controlled combustion. "She is warm," Bryn chimed to herself, her harmonic frequencies tinged with envy. "She is fed. She is comfortable." The first night fell across Nexus 7 like a predator's shadow, bringing with it the sounds of creatures that had evolved specifically to make other creatures nervous. Somewhere in the distance, another emergency beacon activated, followed by the familiar whine of a rescue transport. But from the direction of Celeste's camp, the only sounds were the gentle crackling of a well-maintained fire and the occasional contented sigh of someone enjoying a surprisingly pleasant evening under unfamiliar stars. In the Academy's monitoring station, Commander Haxthal stared at the readouts with growing bewilderment. The human's vital signs showed the steady rhythms of someone who was not merely surviving, but actively thriving. "Sir," his aide reported, "the human appears to be sleeping." "Sleeping?" Haxtall's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "On a Deathworld? During her first night?" "Yes, sir. Deep, regular breathing patterns. Optimal body temperature. No signs of stress or distress." The commander made another note in his increasingly battered datapad. Tomorrow, he decided, was going to be very interesting indeed. The second dawn on Nexus 7 arrived with considerably more attitude than the first. The binary suns emerged through cloud formations that looked suspiciously like the universe's way of giving everyone the middle finger, while atmospheric pressure readings suggested that weather was about to become a very personal problem for anyone still foolish enough to remain planetside. Commander Haxthal observed the meteorological data with the grim satisfaction of someone whose job description included character building through controlled suffering. The approaching storm system registered as a Category 9 atmospheric disturbance, complete with lightning that could melt metal, and winds capable of relocating small mountains. "Perfect," he muttered, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "This should separate the survivals from the statistics." The storm announcement reached the remaining cadets through their emergency communicators with all the warmth of a tax audit. 7 of the original 12 had already activated their extraction beacons, leaving behind a hardy group of 5, who were about to discover exactly how much worse things could get. Celeste received the weather alert while engaged in what appeared to be recreational fishing. She had fashioned a line from unraveled emergency cord and was using local insects as bait, having discovered that the thermal pools contained a species of scaled creature that tasted remarkably like trout if you squinted and used your imagination. "Category 9 storm system approaching," her communicator announced with mechanical cheerfulness. "Estimated time to arrival 4 hours. Recommended action, seek immediate shelter." "Ah?" Celeste mused, reeling in her line. 4 hours? That's plenty of time to weatherproof the shelter and set up proper drainage. Good thing I brought that tarp. 3 kilometers away, Nex struggled with the fundamental realization that his species' evolutionary advantages meant absolutely nothing in the face of meteorological apocalypse. His shadow manipulation abilities were useless against wind, his enhanced night vision wouldn't help in zero visibility, and his natural camouflage was pointless when the environment itself was trying to kill him. He had spent the past hour attempting to fortify his position in a lava tube, using emergency supplies and chunks of volcanic rock to create windbreaks. The process was exhausting, terrifying, and ultimately futile. The approaching storm would flood his shelter with superheated air and toxic gases within minutes of arrival. Through the increasingly violent wind, he caught sight of movement on the ridge above. The human was walking purposefully across the landscape, carrying what appeared to be an armload of local vegetation. As he watched in fascination, she began weaving the plant matter into some kind of flexible mat, working with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before. "Impossible," Nex whispered to himself. "She's improving her shelter during a pre-storm period. Who does that?" The answer, apparently, was someone who had spent childhood summers learning to batten down against Wyoming blizzards. Coral had given up any pretense of dignified survival and was now in full panic mode. Her aquatic physiology made her particularly vulnerable to atmospheric pressure changes, and the approaching storm threatened to turn her gill slits into liability instead of assets. She had wedged herself into a crevice between 2 boulders, sealed her emergency kit, and was seriously considering the merits of immediate extraction. That's when she heard singing. The sound drifted across the wasteland like auditory hallucination. A cheerful, off-key rendition of what sounded like a traditional human work song. Following the melody led her to a sight that challenged everything she thought she knew about appropriate survival behavior. Celeste had constructed what could only be described as a masterpiece of improvised engineering. Her original shelter had been expanded and reinforced with local materials, creating a structure that looked capable of withstanding considerably more than a mere Category 9 storm. Drainage channels guided water away from the foundation, windbreaks deflected the worst gusts, and a carefully banked fire provided both warmth and a means of cooking. "Oh, hey Coral," Celeste called out, looking up from her work. "How's it going? You might want to find better shelter before this storm hits. It's going to be a big one. Coral's chromatophores flickered with desperate confusion. How are you so calm? The meteorological data indicates conditions incompatible with survival. Yeah, the weather's going to be pretty rough, Celeste agreed, securing another support beam. But this isn't too different from the storms we get back home. My family's cabin got hit by a tornado once, and we just rode it out in the root cellar. Dad always says the key is preparation and not panicking when things get exciting. You consider potentially lethal weather conditions to be exciting? Well, I mean, it's definitely more interesting than sitting around doing nothing. Plus, there's something really satisfying about building something that can handle whatever nature throws at it. Celeste gestured toward her shelter with obvious pride. Want to wait out the storm here? I've got plenty of space, and I just caught some of those fish things for dinner. Before Coral could respond, the storm arrived with the subtlety of a cosmic freight train. Wind speeds that could relocate architecture met precipitation that could etch glass, creating conditions that made the previous day's weather seem quaint by comparison. Emergency beacons activated in rapid succession as the remaining cadets made the entirely reasonable decision to prioritize survival over pride. Inside Celeste's shelter, the storm sounded like the universe was trying to renegotiate the laws of physics through volume and percussion. But the structure held. The fire continued burning, and the human continued treating the whole experience like an extended camping trip that happened to include apocalyptic weather. This is actually pretty cozy, Celeste observed, turning the roasting fish over the fire. The sound's kind of relaxing once you get used to it. Reminds me of those thunderstorms we get in the mountains. You know, the kind where you can feel the lightning in your teeth? Coral huddled in the corner, her entire worldview undergoing systematic deconstruction. You find this relaxing? Sure. I mean, we're warm, we're dry, we've got food, and there's nothing we can do about the weather anyway. Might as well enjoy it. Celeste passed her a portion of the cooked fish. Try this. It's actually pretty good. With a bit of that mineral salt from the thermal pools, outside the storm continued its assault on the landscape with the persistence of someone trying to win an argument through sheer volume. But inside the shelter, two entirely different species shared a meal, while one of them explained the finer points of storm appreciation to the other. The secret, Celeste continued, is not fighting the weather. You can't control it, so you just have to roll with it, build something strong enough to handle the worst of it, make sure you're comfortable, and wait for it to pass. My grandmother used to say that storms make the best stories afterward. As if to emphasize her point, something large and probably carnivorous howled in the distance, followed immediately by the distinctive whine of another emergency beacon. And there goes another one, Celeste mildly. That's got to be, 8 extractions now? In the Academy's monitoring station, Commander Haxel stared at the readouts with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality was undergoing hostile revision. The human's vital signs continued to show optimal ranges. Her shelter's structural integrity was holding against Category 9 conditions, and her thermal signature suggested she was maintaining a comfortable temperature. Sir, his aide reported with barely concealed amazement, the human's bio readings indicate she may be enjoying herself. Enjoying herself? Haxtel's voice carried the tone of someone whose universe had just performed an unauthorized software update. During a survival test? On a Deathworld? In the middle of a Category 9 storm? Yes, sir. Elevated mood indicators, stable stress hormones, optimal nutritional intake. If I didn't know better, I'd say she was having a pleasant weekend. The commander's stylus finally gave up and snapped in half. Tomorrow was the final day, and he was beginning to suspect that the Academy's most challenging survival test was about to become the galaxy's most embarrassing educational experience. Outside, the storm raged on, reshaping the landscape according to its own violent preferences. But in one small corner of Nexus 7, a human and an aquatic alien shared stories and roasted fish while waiting for the weather to improve, treating survival as something between a skill and an art form. The universe, it seemed, still had a few surprises left to deliver. The third dawn on Nexus 7 arrived with the sheepish demeanor of a universe that had perhaps gotten slightly carried away with the whole Deathworld concept. The binary suns emerged through clearing skies, illuminating a landscape that looked like it had been personally rearranged by a committee of particularly vindictive gods. Of the original 12 cadets, exactly 3 remained. Nex, who had survived through sheer stubborn determination and liberal application of shadow manipulation techniques. Coral, who had discovered the life-saving benefits of human hospitality. and Celeste, who was currently conducting what appeared to be a leisurely morning survey of the post-storm terrain. Final extraction point is 12 kilometers northeast, her communicator announced with the mechanical enthusiasm of a device that had given up trying to understand human behavior. Estimated travel time across current terrain, 6 to 8 hours for standard bipedal locomotion. Perfect, Celeste replied, shouldering her pack with the casual efficiency of someone heading out for a day hike. That gives us plenty of time to take the scenic route. The scenic route turned out to be a masterclass in Deathworld navigation. Where neck saw impassable chasms carved by the storm, Celeste identified safe crossing points and natural bridges. Where Coral observed unstable terrain that could collapse without warning, the human pointed out solid geological formations and reliable handholds. You navigate this landscape, Nex observed with growing amazement, as if you were born to it. Well, not born to it exactly, Celeste replied, helping Coral negotiate a particularly treacherous section of loose volcanic rock. But I've done a lot of hiking in rough terrain. The principles are pretty much the same. Watch where you step, test on certain surfaces, and always have a backup plan. 3 hours into their journey, they encountered their first significant obstacle, a chasm that hadn't existed before the storm, stretching 40 meters across and dropping into depths that suggested an appointment with geological finality for anyone foolish enough to fall. Nex and Coral stared at the gap with the resignation of people whose emergency beacons were beginning to look like reasonable options. Celeste examined the chasm with the critical eye of someone evaluating a moderately challenging puzzle. She mused. This is actually pretty cool. See how the storm carved through that softer rock layer? You can read the whole geological history just from the exposed strata. Fascinating, Coral bubbled with barely contained hysteria. How do we cross it? Oh, that's easy, Celeste replied, pointing toward a section where the chasm narrowed significantly. We go round to that natural bridge about half a kilometer upstream. It'll add maybe 20 minutes to our travel time, but it's totally solid. See how the rock changes color there? That's a much harder mineral formation. The extraction point buzzed with activity as rescue shuttles collected the various cadets who had discovered their personal limitations over the past 72 hours. Medical teams stood ready to treat exhaustion, dehydration, and the psychological trauma that apparently came standard with Deathworld survival, which made the arrival of the final group particularly noteworthy. Celeste strolled into the extraction zone with the relaxed gait of someone returning from a pleasant nature walk, followed by 2 alien cadets who appeared to be experiencing some form of existential crisis. She waved cheerfully at the medical team, declined their offer of emergency treatment, and began chatting with the shuttle pilot about the local weather patterns. Commander Haxthul approached with the careful steps of someone whose understanding of reality had been systematically demolished over the past 3 days. "Forget Nightingale," he began, his voice carrying the tone of someone asking a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. "How would you rate the difficulty of this survival test?" Celeste considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Well, it was definitely more challenging than a regular camping trip, she admitted. The air quality was pretty rough, and that storm was intense. But honestly, it was kind of relaxing. No emails, no deadlines, just basic survival stuff. I haven't slept that well in months. The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or the sound of his sanity finally giving up. "Cadet Nightingale, you do realize you just survived 72 hours on a Class XII Deathworld." "Yeah, but I mean, it's not like it was a Class XV or anything really dangerous," Celeste replied reasonably. "Plus, Earth's a Class XX ride, so this was actually easier than home in some ways. Better water sources, fewer things trying to eat you, and way fewer poisonous plants." The silence that followed possessed the quality of a small supernova, brief, intense, and fundamentally reality-altering. "Earth," Commander Hexthul repeated slowly, "is classified as a Class XXI Deathworld." "Oh yeah, super dangerous place. Extreme weather, aggressive fauna, natural disasters, radiation exposure, atmospheric composition that's toxic to most species." Celeste trailed off, noticing the expressions around her. "Wait. You guys didn't know that?" In the Academy's files, a hasty addendum was added to the human species assessment. Previous classification as harmless requires immediate revision. Recommend advanced survival protocols for all future human cadets. The next day, Celeste signed up for advanced survival training. commenting that the basic test had been nice, but maybe a bit too easy. The universe, it seemed, still had a sense of humor after all. 6 months later, the Zerion Prime Military Academy implemented what historians would later call the Nightingale Protocols, a comprehensive revision of their human assessment procedures that began with the assumption that what didn't kill them probably made them homesick. The Crucible Protocol received its first major update in 2 centuries with the addition of Class X5 environmental challenges specifically designed for enhanced resilience species. Early test results suggested that humans found these conditions more like actual camping, which prompted the Academy to quietly begin researching Class X5I facilities. Celeste, now serving as an unofficial survival instructor, had developed a reputation for casual competence that bordered on the supernatural. Her weekend workshops, euphemistically titled Basic Outdoor Skills for Non-Deathworld Species, consistently booked months in advance, despite her tendency to describe catastrophic survival scenarios as character-building opportunities. The Academy's mortality rate dropped to historic lows, primarily because Celeste had an annoying habit of wandering into dangerous situations specifically to rescue cadets who were having a rough time. Her personnel file now included a standing order requiring 2 emergency shuttles for any training exercise she attended, one for regular extractions, and one specifically designated for the inevitable stream of cadets she would inevitably shepherd to safety while complaining about the local weather. The universe, meanwhile, continued finding new ways to surprise itself.